Good evening, good afternoon, happy New Year's, and a very important holiday today here in the U.S. as we remember the birthday, the incredible life and impact of the great Dr. Martin Luther King. And with that, we welcome you to the one and only Highbury Squad podcast. Let's get stuck in.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.
Hello, and welcome to a slightly different looking Highbury Squad today. I am Magic Mike. Some of you may remember me. I've been kind of hibernating for the last 8 months or so, but if you don't remember me, my condolences on having to deal with me today. The debonair individual to my right is, of course, the one and only Super Kevin Campbell. Hello, and welcome.
Happy New Year to you, Magic Mike, to you and your family. And great to see you hosting.
Got to get off the bench at some point. Got to get off the bench at some point. We'll see if I remember how to do this.
At ease.
So don't call it a comeback, Kevin. I've been here for years.
Yeah.
But I think I've hosted one podcast in the last 7 or 8 months. It was 27 hours long, but it doesn't count as 27 podcasts. So we'll see if I have a little bit of rustiness. But when you get the phone call from Sophie and she asks you if you can host and stand in for her, you don't turn it down. It's a different phone that rings. It's a different ring, I think is what I said. So the answer was always going to be yes. Speaking of helping out the Highbury Squad, did you know that this show does not generate its own electricity? This show is actually powered by Zenith coins, Kevin.
Oh, I understand that. And Zenith coins have been fantastic sponsors.
I mean, Zenith coin. If it wasn't for Zenith coins, we would be podcasting in the dark, which would be less pleasant for us. Might actually be helpful to some of you when I'm on. But Zenith Coins is an official licensed partner of the Arsenal and of the Highbury Squad. Zenith Coins support the future, treasure the past. Now, I'm going to do something completely off the rails here. They might get mad at me for this. I don't know. But just because I've decided this, I'm going to give you 15% off of your purchase on Zenith Coins at zenithcoins.com. I mean, there's nothing more that you could ask for, Kevin. You could ask for 16%, but you would be really, really pushing your luck.
15% is a good discount.
15% is a good discount. You go to zenithcoins.com to get 15% off. You enter the promo code HS15. Now, I have no idea what the HS stands for. I think it's Harry Simeo. I can't think of anything else with the abbreviations HS, but HS15. Nice of them to name a promotion after Harry, and you can follow them on the socials at Zenith Coins, and you can see that at the scroll at the bottom of the screen. So thank you to them for keeping the power on, keeping the light on behind me. Is it Zenith or Zenith, Kevin?
Zenith.
Because I remember growing up, and maybe this is just an American versus English thing. I remember growing up, and all the TVs were made by like RCA and JVC, and Zenith is what we called it.
Yeah, you might pronounce it a little different at times.
It's like the Nike and the Puma type of thing. So we do it wrong, is what you're telling me.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Zenith Coins. It's Zenith Coins. It's Monday Madness here on the Highbury Squad, which is pretty appropriate because even though in the last few months I've been trying to stay off Twitter and Facebook and Threads and Reddit and Mastodon and CompuServe and AOL and Prodigy and definitely been avoiding that toxic CFAX. I can't help but notice a bit of madness going around the Arsenal fan base the last few weeks. I mean, it's not the normal kumbaya happy fan base that it normally is, Kev. What's going on?
Yeah, well, look, losing form can do that to the Gooners, can't it? Magic Mike, being top at Christmas, everybody was happy. And to be fair, we haven't been ourselves after that. Played 3 games, created an incredible amount of chances, and our finishing let us down badly. And we're losing games. Now we find ourselves down the pecking order. And, the locals ain't going to be happy, Magic. They're not going to be happy. So I get it. I get it. But this is where we do have to stick together. The boys will be all right. They will. And, they've gone for warm weather training and then obviously Crystal Palace is next. So that's going to be the big test, isn't it, at the Emirates?
Yeah, I mean it's almost a good. It's not almost. I think it is a very good time for a 2-week break, followed by another 2-week break that's a bit self-inflicted by not having a game 2 weeks from now on FA Cup weekend, which is another kind of sucker punch that's happened. But something that is positive is the incredible squaddies who are in the chat. Let's say hello to some of them. We've got Tammy Steele's, the Chief Like Officer, not able to be here tonight, but she asks if we can please remember to hit the likes on the way in, hit them while you're here, hit them when you leave, don't leave. We've got Lynn Simpson in the house, Lone Star Londoner. We've got Evgeny in the house, PWCM. Who else we got? Lynn, PWCM, Trevor. We've got Aditya, I've seen from in the middle of the night in India right now. Donald, Ian, a whole bunch of people in the chat. We've got 105 live. Please hit the like button. Barry's in the house now. Demsek, of course, who we're going to talk about in a little bit. And even Mr. Gunnar Russ.
Legend.
I thought with Russ, one of my very, very close friends, I could just put his tweet up or his comment up without reading it, but no, he had to use the F word in it. So we're taking that off. Russ, you filthy old man. So before we start talking about Arsenal in too much depth, the big news for today, of course, is about FFP. We've got some charges announced today, and I hate to say it, but it almost seems personal against the one and only Kevin Campbell. I mean, here are the clubs at the Premier League, and I don't even think they have jurisdiction over some of these clubs, but they've announced the potential penalties for Everton, Nottingham Forest, West Brom, Trabzonspor, Cardiff City, Leyton Orient, Leicester City, and the England number 21 team. I mean, it's basically everybody that you've ever played for other than Arsenal.
It is personal, Magic, isn't it? It feels personal. But what I've got to say is, I think when we know there's other teams who have many, 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 many charges against them, and they don't even get a mention, Magic. I think this is gonna divide football. Some of these clubs. I don't know where all this has come from all of a sudden, but
I know where it is.
But it's serious.
It's coming. It's coming from, and it's timed exactly to basically defray the scrutiny of Parliament, which is looking to put an independent football regulator. I believe there's a session about that tomorrow, and today suddenly some self-enforcement comes out. I think there was a session planned for the following day when Everton's original breach was mentioned. I mean, it's not random timing. Let's just put it that way.
No, I get that.
I will say one thing about the whataboutism that's going on, the Chelsea and Man City thing. And this is not to defend the Premier League, because there's no defending the Premier League. There's a lot going on there, but there is a difference between the 3 years, which is technically 4 years, that start in the COVID season of 2019 and end last May, of looking at what was spent versus what was earned and what was actually lost in those years. There's a difference between a simple calculation that comes out to losing more than 105 million over that period of time. And then there's the things that are currently being adjudged against Chelsea and Manchester City especially, which is improprieties in how they gained and reported and paid players, paying people under the table, funneling money in from the owners illegally through sponsorship deals that are mocked up. Those things are kind of more of a legal battle. These things are more of an accounting issue. And don't get me wrong, Chelsea is headed towards this once next season's comes out. So they're still in a period of time where their Champions League winning season was part of their revenues, where they actually made money. And so, the fact that they're not falling afoul of the same rules that Forest and Everton are isn't necessarily because they're just buying people off. It's because their problem years haven't necessarily fully hit yet.
Come up yet? Yeah, it hasn't come up yet.
And they've got a lot of work to do before the books close in May of this year, because they are absolutely going to blow those losses out of the water in just 1 year. The other clubs, yeah, they're a little bit easier to penalize, but they're being penalized over much simpler things to adjudicate. And I think that's why you're seeing these things and not affecting the ones who, I mean, there's a reason Liverpool and Arsenal are not on this list today, and it's because they haven't broken those rules.
Yeah.
Not yet, because their losses, haven't been incurred. They've sold enough players. Liverpool's sold all those players for big money. We terminated all those contracts and got them off the books. It's, so it is different, but yeah, this goes on for too much longer, where the relative minnows of the Premier League get penalized and EFL teams get penalized, and the massive rule breakers don't. And I can certainly understand why why people are talking about this. But I looked at the two clubs today, realized I was hosting a podcast with you, and I was like, wait, he's got to be pretty annoyed at this.
Yeah, I'm not happy, but you know what, Magic, I want to see how all this plays out, because after the first one charge, Everton got 10 points.
Yeah.
So, okay, I want to see how all this plays out now, because if they're going to stick to how they usually adjudicate, let's see what they do.
Yeah, I mean, look, they've set a precedent now. They've stuck their foot in, and they could only create more problems for themselves if they don't hold other teams to the same standard, and if they don't look at the relative severity of things. I mean, the only thing that Man City has going for them as to why they haven't been docked points is because they haven't yet been proven guilty in the legal system of what they're being accused of doing. Once they are, if they are, and they should be, they were by UEFA. It was just overturned on a technicality by CAS or CAF, whatever. Once they are, the penalty should be absolutely devastating. And we'll see, because penalizing them is a lot easier. It's a lot harder for the Premier League to do for its profitability, for its TV contracts, than potentially forcing Nottingham Forest to get relegated. And we know that's true. Are we going to see it in real time? We'll see.
Yeah, it's a tough one, Magic, I tell you. And like I said, I want to see what they really doll out.
Yeah.
This is the important part. Yeah.
And that will all remain to be seen. Maybe we'll see some Magic Mike shows you the money shows when and if I can find time in my schedule to do those. We'll do those. But I'm always I tend to like talking about football finances. There's just not a lot of easy answers sometimes. I can't tell you how many late night, early morning discussions I've had with Hoggy over this in our text group, and no matter how many times I keep telling him how it works, he doesn't care. I guess once you reach a certain age, it doesn't matter anymore. But so as you know, I make a fair number of trips over the pond to watch the mighty Arsenal, and normally when I go, it works out great. People are begging me to stay. They're like, "You're good luck," blah blah blah. This last one, not so much. My boy Jake and I, who you know quite well, came over for the 3 festive period games. We'd just beaten Brighton right before the trip, top of the league. Here we come. It's done deal. We're coming in to celebrate, and we come in for a three game set starting at Anfield, where we'd never been for an away game. A nice easy home matchup against West Ham, and then a London derby at Fulham. No problems. And it started well. I felt pretty good about the point that we took at Anfield. I mean, that could be debated about whether we should be okay taking a point at Anfield. But given how Liverpool played in the middle half of that game, after the first 20 minutes and before the last 20 minutes, it was pretty good getting out of there with a point. And I got this picture 35 years too late. It's a 35-year-old scarf. I wish I could have lifted that on the night of May 26, 1989, but unlike 4 million other of my fellow Gunners, I was not there. So I at least got to do this on that night. But then it didn't go so well. I call it an unkosher finish to the year, because we were slammed with back-to-back ham games, West Ham and Fulham, And we played like my Jewish mother, who's very discombobulated and uncomfortable around him. And I don't expect that out of Arsenal. So, I mean, I know that you've probably covered this because you've done podcasts since the turn of the year, but expand on what you think has happened, whether this is a blip or something more concerning to you.
Well, it's a blip, Magic, but like I said a little bit earlier on, this is the type of form that gets the locals unhappy. Because I think they were all different games. I think the Fulham game was a little bit worrying because after we take the lead and they come back into it and go ahead, we couldn't respond. As a team, we couldn't respond and put them under big pressure. We didn't look to be that team. But even the West Ham game, I mean, we created so many chances against West Ham. And we couldn't finish. I think we could have still been playing now, Magic, and wouldn't have scored. So,
yeah, I think we had like 30 some odd shots in that game, and the most touches inside the opponent's box of any game in a long, long time, and yet could not put a single one past them. Some games are like that. It was unfortunate, but the Fulham game, you're absolutely right. And the, being in the away section, which normally, even when we're in a run of poor form, the away section, especially for London, I mean, it usually starts out very, very positive, very, very supportive. And I got to tell you, by the second half of that game, the weather was, I mean, my God, I've never seen it rain so hard. I was very happy to be undercover.
Yeah.
B, you started hearing some pretty pointed comments about some pretty Teflon, players who normally escape those comments. I mean, the amount of negativity I heard pointed towards a guy who I love more than I love myself, Bukayo Saka, in that game. Now, I will say he looked borderline disinterested for a large part of that game, and it's just, to me, it was shocking to see that. Obviously, Gabby Martinelli's also been in a really, really poor run of form, especially that game against Liverpool, which we won despite him. I mean, these are players who, they're young. They've shown flashes of brilliance, and sometimes more than flashes of brilliance. But the effort level is what we start to worry about in that game against Fulham. And is that a function of fatigue that maybe these couple of breaks in January will help with? Or is it something different about just never ever getting a break and being able to kind of shut off for a moment? What leads to that?
Yeah, I can't say it's fatigue, but it can be. It can be, but I'm not going to say it's fatigue, Magic. These guys have known how to play this game. They're getting stronger. They're getting stronger because season after season after season, they're playing, and that should make you stronger. I just think all the numbers of our front boys are down. All of them. And when you want to be up there challenging, we can't afford those numbers to slip because we rely on committee. We haven't got one striker who, like a Haaland or, whoever, to be that guy. We haven't got that. We rely on all of them to chip in. And they haven't been doing it, Magic. Let's be honest. They haven't been doing it.
Everybody's hit the skids at the exact same time. It's like
exactly.
It's like the form version of an injury glut, like we've had, like Newcastle had, where you got a bunch of people out at the same time, and then on top of that, you get a bunch of the people who are in just all running out of their form at the same time, and that, I mean, it's worrisome, and that does, and I'm generally fairly supportive of Mikel Arteta, but when everybody kind of loses form and confidence at the same time, you can't look at everybody as an individual. You might feel differently, but you do kind of start saying, well, what's going on here? What's going on in the dressing room? Is the Ramsdale thing starting to affect people? Is there something else that's going on where there's just a change in that harmonious feel? You haven't heard that from any of the current players openly, which you would have in the past when some of the discontents were playing for us, and you'd start to hear and see body language and stuff. You haven't heard it yet, but you got to wonder, the thing that made us great last season when we were great, and that I think has gotten us to where we are right now, is quality combined with just an absolute elite together mentality.
Mhm.
And that's what I'm seeing that seems to be changing
That's
right
not
before our eyes.
there. Yeah, but imagine here's the crazy thing. We created so many chances but didn't take them. Could you imagine we didn't create any chances?
Yeah.
So
I mean, it wasn't so long ago we were giving up 30 shots to Watford and creating virtually nothing and
Exactly.
and losing or drawing these games. I guess the lesser of two evils is not finishing our dinner, but cooking it.
Yeah.
And the alternative, which is not even cooking your dinner. And the thing is, I fear that might be coming soon. I mean, I definitely saw this season as kind of slow playing compared to last season, not coming out of the gate, trying to rest our players and give them a little, have a little bit more rotation. I thought that's what should be doing, and that was a good explanation for kind of falling behind our points pace from last year. But I have to admit, and I'm not just reacting to the last 4 games alone, or the last 3, if you don't even want to include Liverpool, because I think we acquitted ourselves rather well for the majority of the game against Liverpool. The last 3 games have just been a bit of a really bad run in form, and I'm very interested to see what happens against Palace and Nottingham Forest over the next 2 weeks, because I think we'll then really see, was this a blip or is there something more?
We've got to make it a blip, Magic.
Yeah,
We've got
I
to
agree
make
with
it a
that.
blip, and we don't tend to do too well away at Forest. It's a bit of a bogey ground for us, but again,
it's a bogey ground for me. I don't do too well away at Forest. If anyone who was there with our group remember my form that day, I was not in good form whatsoever. So I'm glad that they're going away without me this year. But
we have to make it. We have to make it a good ground for us again. This is the thing. All of those difficult games from the past, we have to perform, Magic, and I think we will. I think the boys, they know they can win the league. They know they should be better. The key to everything, Magic, is prove it. Go out there and prove it. Show us you're the best.
Well, it's Monday Madness. I'm seeing a lot of madness, and I don't mean craziness. I mean people who are mad in the chat. Arsenal clearly have a lot to prove to the squaddies, who, by and large, are a patient, comforting group of people. But and I'm not going to characterize it as unreasonable. Just noticing that I see it a lot. Newman, you know what? She'll be back soon.
You're right. We do miss her.
We do miss her, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But in the meantime, you've got me and Albert, and of course Super Kev. So relative to last season, before we move on to kind of another topic, this is the midway mark, about the midway mark, 20 games into last season. Arsenal clear by 5 points at the top. Man City. This is after we've come back from the World Cup, 2 losses, 2 draws only, and 5 points clear of Man City at the top of the league. This year, bit of a different story. We are down at 40 points after 20 games rather than 50. We are, clinging on to top 4, but by the same token, it's a really, really much tighter top 4. We're 5 points back of Liverpool, 3 of Man City, 3 of Villa with 1 less game played. So it's all to play for still. There's absolutely no reason to think that we've blown the league already, but certainly we're in a trend position that isn't comfortable. Look, you can throw your toys out of the pram if you want. I'm not choosing to do that quite yet, but you could do that.
There's a lot of football to be played, Magic.
A lot.
A hell of a lot of football to be played.
So you don't think the players look tired?
No. Listen, when you're creating all those chances, Magic, let me tell you something. When you are creating all those chances, that's where the effort is. The effort is when you're creating the chances. Our problem has been, Magic, we haven't taken them. That's where our numbers are really down. That killer instinct, we've said it many times. You've got to have that killer instinct. You've got to have that tenacity to bury teams. we weren't as clinical as that before, but even more so now, it's worse. It's worse. So we
It's the
need
exact
that
thing
back.
it's the exact thing we were doing, and I don't even want to bring in those two letters that are used together to talk about chances and stuff. I'm not even going to say them, but it is worth noticing that number was a lot higher last year. Or no, we were performing closer to that level last year and way below it this year. It's like it's everything was falling our way in the first half of last season, and it just seems to be the exact opposite. I hope that regresses to the mean, to where we actually see the results that we're creating. But I think it's worth it. It's worth recognizing that it's all right to be a little bit. Not that anyone needs me to tell them it's all right, but to be a bit concerned at this point, I get it. I just don't get involved in the fast forwarding to the end and assuming that this is just over.
Yeah.
And then starting to try to deconstruct the reasons why, and that's just me.
That's why I'm saying there's a lot of football to be played.
Plus,
why do you reckon the league is like that? Because there's more teams involved now.
Also, do people realize that this trip to Dubai is not just about rest and relaxation and good weather? I mean, they are getting like horse placenta and steroids and all. They're sprinkling it onto their food. Like it's just people are going crazy over that picture just because the guy is an absolute weapon. And I'm not talking about Arteta. I'm talking about the other guy. But the stuff that they're putting on the steaks, that is going to help us, and it's going completely undetected by the Premier League. So, being January as well, Kev, we've got a certain kind of period of time that comes every year in this window, a chance for teams to take stock of their problem areas, and if they can find the right person at the right price, or if you're Chelsea, find the wrong person at any price. It's called the January transfer window, and it's hard to believe we're already halfway through this window. I mean, it seems to get more and more so every year, but in the entire Premier League, other than loans and people recalled from loans, there've only been 3 players that have been purchased for money on permanent deals in the entirety of the Premier League. 2 of them were people I'd never heard of for under £3 million, and the third was a guy I'd never heard of, purchased for £25 million by Spurs, Radu Dragusin, who got his debut off the bench yesterday. For $25 million. So, I just don't understand, Kevin, why we haven't signed Osimhen, Tony, Benzema, Mavila, Draxler, Douglas Luiz, Onana, Fofana, Lallana, Mandanda, Ogbonna, Obama, and a few more young Brazilian dudes that could end up turning into Martinellis. I mean, clearly the money's there to be spent, right? And it's easy to sign players in January.
The problems are, Magic, as you well know, there's certain criteria that you have to fit in with. And Arsenal, they might have the money come the end of the season. But if they're going to sign people, they're going to have to box clever and do it with probably loans.
I'm hearing about a loan for Benzema now. Apparently, he wants out of Saudi Arabia. Like, is that? I mean, it's almost just a joke at this point when people start talking about like Benzema, Draxler, and Mavila. Like I know they're all still playing football, but I mean, is this just trolling at this point, or is there actually a possibility of that? Because I wouldn't turn my nose down at that.
I'm not so sure. Benzema, we know what type of striker he is. He's a finisher.
I'd rather have Giroud than Benzema, I'll tell you that much.
That boy is a finisher. You create the chances, he will finish them off. But, you got to look at what type of condition is he in, being over in Saudi. Money might be a problem because he's earning a king's ransom, isn't he, out there? So I'm not so sure if that's anything going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I know that you were recently on a podcast, I think on Dan's channel with Tom, where he kind of indicated that he wouldn't be surprised if there were really no moves made in January at all. And so far, the first 2 weeks of the year, even for Liverpool and City and Chelsea and all these teams that are, typically very active in the market. We're just not seeing it. And, certainly at least up to today, not that any kind of transfer this January impacts FFP this January. It doesn't, but it is kind of involved in future planning and that sort of thing as to whether you make a move or not. So, perhaps waiting for today to kind of find out what position they were in, if they didn't actually know well before today, has been part of the delay, and we'll start to see a lot more movement going on. But certainly not like last January, where you saw some serious money transfers, a lot of them having to see, and even us with Trossard and I think Gakpo going to Liverpool. You're just not seeing those this January. And, as much as I recognize that we could probably use a more clinical goal scorer right now, I just don't know that it's in the cards for this season. But, that's something you'd have to, ask the gerbil about, or somebody who's actually in the know, because I certainly wouldn't know anything about that stuff. But let's say we do have the ability to bring in one or two reinforcements. Where on the pitch are you looking to strengthen and reinforce?
I think all aspects of the team. Defense, I've got to say, it's good to see Timber back out on the grass. Good to see him back out on the grass, I must say. But, he's not going to be fully ready till March, which we might need him in March. So, just take your time with him and make sure he's all right. Magic, if I'm honest with your defense, midfield and attack, one of each if we can.
Oh, I thought you meant all 11 spot, like we need 11 signings in January, but no.
But the likelihood of us getting one, we might get one. That's about it. Because, a lot of these players, a lot of the quality players that we're looking at, they're still playing in Champions League.
Yeah.
So it's difficult because you want to acquire the best players that you can. And we are now a Champions League club. So fortunately, we have that power back now. And if we're going to acquire players, they're going to have to be Champions League ready. And very rarely do you get the top ones who are not involved in the second half of the Champions League.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy. And I just find it easier to just tune it out for the time being. I mean, I know there are people who can't do that. And frankly, at times I can't do that myself. But trust me, ignorance can be bliss sometimes when it comes to transfer windows and life in general. I mean, it's good to be smart, but sometimes it's good to just ignore shit. Sorry. Speaking of transfers, squaddies, if you've got any kind of questions you want to ask Super Kev or for some odd reason me, transfer those into the chat right now. Put a Q in front of them so that I can easily identify, because this chat moves a little quicker than the chats I'm used to hosting. Let's just put it that way. And that's a credit to you and Sophie and the channel. But if you want to ask any questions, we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end of the show. We'll save them and do that. How many likes do we got? Because we've got 211 in the live chat right now. I can't see how many likes we have, but if it's not 120, I'm going to
ask Ross.
Russ, how many likes do we have? Because we don't have the chief like officer here. If it's not 120 at this point, I'm going to go dive in the pool, and you're going to have to wait for me to come out and dry off. But what are we at right now? 75. Russ says 32. So Aditya I trust Aditya 10 times as much as I trust Russ, and I know Russ 10 times as well as I know Aditya. So I'm going to say we have 75. Hit the like button. Kev, tell them what they need to do with the like button right now, because there's a lot of different options.
Listen, just tap it, slot it, make sure you put it in the back of the net like what our first team ain't doing at the moment. So come on, let's all get together.
Or
broke the neck.
And I've had my neck broke before. It does not feel good, and I would not recommend it for anybody. So hit that like button right now. Help get YouTube to recognize that this is the best podcast on the planet, and then everyone will be happy. So there's basically one other competition, completely separate from the Premier League, that we're still involved in. And it's this thing I just learned about recently. It's this newfangled thing called like the Champagne League or the Champions Tournament or something. I forget what the actual name is, but there's this other tournament that we're in apparently. And we've got games against Porto coming up and possibly beyond that. Do you see us as being in a position to make a deep run in both competitions? Are we going to be sitting here like in previous years in February and March having the discussion of, which one should we focus on? The league's gone. Let's just focus everything on the Champions League, or vice versa. What's your expectation given where we are now of what we should be expecting on the two fronts that we have left this season?
Yeah, I think we've performed in the Champions League. Porto are a good side, very good side. But I fancy us because in the Champions League, what we found is teams open up and attack you. So that works in our favor beautifully, Magic. So I fancy us against them. The key is getting a result out there.
It is interesting that how you do seem to see so much more open play. I mean, the Premier League, these are teams that just know each other back and forth. They know how to scheme against each other. And with 5 or 6 different exceptions, you see teams that don't have as much talent as we do set up in a way that makes it very hard for us. I mean, they game plan well against us, and it's up to us to overcome that, as we have in certain cases. I remember a game, I think it was Wolves earlier this season, where they set up to defend. We just broke them so early and broke them a couple of times with some amazing team goals that, that it was 3-0 by the time, it was 2-0 by the time they woke up. Now, the game ended 2-1 and a little bit nervy, but the point was, they had no choice but to go after us after a while. But in general, you see teams kind of parking the bus. You see them playing, everyone behind the ball. You rarely ever see that in the Premier League, no matter what the discrepancy in talent is. And speaking of which, I mean, these are the teams that are left. There's no real easy games in there for anybody. And the way I know you watch a lot of La Liga and cover La Liga, but the way Real Madrid looks right now, watching them yesterday in the Super Cup final,
frightening.
They
look frightening.
At this point, I don't see how they're as likely to win the Champions League again this season. I mean, there's only 1 or 2 teams that I see that could stop them. I don't see us squaring up against Real Madrid and taking a 2-legged tie right now. And that's not to say it couldn't happen, but I mean, they're just at a different level right now, even than Manchester City, especially in their current form. But so I mean, it's a tough one to win. Although I think at least we were at one point like 3rd favorites to win the entire tournament before the group stage started.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we're built for European football. Champions League, where teams can attack us and then we could counter-attack them. I think we're definitely tailor-made for that. The difference is, Magic, as you get further down into the knockout stages, you've got some really, really top teams who know how to set up, as you said, scheme. And it's right. They know how to scheme against you to make sure, they don't mind you having it in certain places, but they're not going to let the likes of Martinelli and Saka do what they do to a lot of the other teams. They're not. So again, we're going to have to be a lot smarter. And one of the good things that's coming out of this Dubai trip, with Thomas Partey, we've missed him. We've missed Thomas Partey, and we've all said we want Thomas Partey to play beside Declan Rice, and we haven't had that.
Yeah, I am looking forward to seeing him play against Palace and Forest, and then I'm just not expecting him to play again after that. But I mean, it's a bonus. Look, it's a bonus. So a couple of questions from the squaddies that are related to the Champions League. let's see, from Lone Star Londoner, where they're, I believe he's in Texas, and they're getting some snow in Texas.
Wow.
Crazy, crazy weather here in the old US of A. It's even a little chilly. It's like 16 or 17 degrees here down in Florida right now. But, and I mean Celsius, of course. It's like 61, 63 degrees Fahrenheit. But do you think Arsenal are the most underrated team left in the Champions League when on form? Underrated?
No, I wouldn't say they're underrated, Lone Star. I think Arsenal have surprised quite a few people, and with the youngsters they have and how good they are. But the big test for us is the knockout stage. That's the huge test.
We struggled a bit in knockout competitions the last, we weren't in one last year other than the cups, which we didn't do great in.
And against Portuguese teams who we've failed miserably against.
Yeah.
So, we're gonna have to address these things and make it better.
Yeah, really. Ever since the very, very beginning of Arteta's reign, winning that winning the FA Cup. I know a guy, and more than just a guy, but a guy who constantly tries to devalue that win, the credit of Arteta for that win, because he says that he won the FA Cup with an Emery-infused squad. And I just cannot tell you how much I want to punch that person. Like not really punch him, but like it's just so ridiculous. I mean, it should be seen as a positive when you win with somebody else's squad. And it's not like
what he's done with him.
It's not like he took over peak Real Madrid and just guided them to the title that somebody else earned. He took a squad who was not performing for the previous manager anymore, and somehow got them to win a series of games, including two-legged ties against Chelsea and Manchester City, or one-legged. I don't remember. One of them was the two-legged tie. No, they weren't two-legged ties. It was the FA Cup. Anyway, what I'm saying makes sense. So yeah, that bugs me. But yeah, I mean, ever since then, there hasn't been a whole lot of progression in a whole lot of elimination tournaments, and I think the Champions League getting into the semifinals, I think, is a marker that we have to lay down at the very least in this case, and I think that needs to happen. So not underrated at all, properly rated, you would say.
Yeah, I think we're properly rated. I truly believe we haven't earned our stripes yet, but we're earning them very quickly with our performances in the Champions League, Magic. So I think if we can keep doing what we're doing, I think a lot of teams won't want to get us. They will not want to get the Arsenal. Especially
because, as Aditya points out, I mean, Havertz won the Champions League, literally scored the winning goal for the Champions League for Chelsea in his first season. So, I mean, by that equation, Havertz clearly is going to win us the Champions League this season in his first season with Arsenal. I mean, that is how it works, right?
Well, that would be lovely. I've got to say, that would be great. But just like anything, Magic, got to take it one game at a time, one tie at a time. And, we've got to perform. Now is the time. Second half of the season, we've got to perform. And when the Champions League comes around, we all wanted the music and, being back in the Champions League. Okay, here we are. Now it's the time to deliver.
Yeah, Ian Wallace with the comment, I think that Arsenal just disrespected the Thursday Cup. The Champions League is what the players really want. In the sense, I think he's saying that they just they were underwhelmed by being in that cup, didn't perform well in that cup, and now they're gonna perform because they're energized by being in the Champions League. I mean, I think that's an easy hindsight explanation. Who knows whether that's true? I don't think the players really devalue. I mean, sure, you'd rather be in the Champions League, but I don't think you're not trying as hard to beat Sporting Lisbon, or you're not trying as hard to beat Olympiacos. You don't beat them, but
that game had so many permutations for the rest of our season, didn't it?
Yeah.
Saliba and Tomiyasu got injured in that game, and we were never the same after that.
Yeah,
So,
no, that was a bad one. That's one of those few times that you can point to a specific date. And I remember that date. It was March 16th. I actually had my podcast brothers, Andy and Aston, over at my home that day. And we watched that game together, and just absolutely, that's when the season fell apart,
yeah.
in my view. And it's really, really unfortunate. So, Demsek asking how the unicorn's doing. The unicorn has passed away. The part of the reason I've taken the majority of a year off of doing a lot of podcasts is because I'm mourning the loss of the unicorn. It didn't have what it took to make it through multiple seasons, and there may be a future unicorn, but the unicorn is no longer with us. I feel awful to say. But speaking of unicorns and artwork, which we weren't, but I like to just make up transitions. I want to give you a little bit of a quiz and ask you for your help and opinion on something. But first, when are you going to come visit me in Highbury while I'm there? We need to recreate together your goals. Stand in the North Bank, see the crib.
Well, Magic, I did. I turned the lights on at Christmas.
That's right. I did hear. I wasn't there for that. It was the 1st of December, and I saw that and was very, very upset that I wasn't there for that, because
I turned the lights on. So, for me, because I don't live in London anymore, it's just a matter of timing and when we can do it. So we'll have to work that one out.
Well, one of the comments that we got was that we have to be ruthless. And, as much as I agree Arsenal have to be ruthless, I want to be Ruthful, because the specific Ruth that I want to be in my life is Ruth Beck. And the reason that I'm bringing Ruth Beck up, and you can see her scroll at the bottom of the screen for her amazing artwork, is because her artwork adorns the walls. We went with the Ruth Beck decor for the Highbury flat. And I just want to show you around a little bit. We've got, all of our walls are basically covered in Highbury portraits from Ruth. Absolutely amazing stuff. There's the Highbury Days, the limited edition one there on the left. Couple of special ones over the sink. But this one area over the couch there to the left, right in front of us here, the piece de resistance is going to be over the top of that couch. And it's going to be a painting that we have commissioned for Ruth to do. And I'm deciding between two portraits that we want to turn into paintings. So I want your help as someone who played at Highbury, who I watched play at Highbury. And I found this treasure trove of pictures that I took when I was 17 years old, including one game where I brought my camera to Highbury from the terraces where I stood. I took a bunch of pictures, and there's two of them that I have to decide between to turn into a Ruth Beck original. The first one is this, and of course we'll get rid of those barnets and hair that from people in front of me, but essentially, that's where I used to stand, just to the left side of the goal on the North Bank, looking at the clock end.
Yeah.
And, this is a nice portrait of the pitch. I guess about 10 or 15 minutes before a game. I think you could actually see the clock says 2:45 or 2:50. So this is pregame. This one, I got to admit, I like a little bit more because I took the picture and it's got some of my favorite people in it. This is live action from the about 23rd minute of a game, about 10 seconds after Arsenal had opened the scoring. So, quiz, any idea who the opponent is and who the four Arsenal players from left to right that appear in the front of the picture are? Is this going to be too tough, or do you have an idea? I can even give you the date of the game if you want.
Well, that looks like Perry Groves, Alan Smith. Is that Anders Limpar?
No, Limpar wasn't here when this picture was taken. So yeah, Perry Groves is kind of just to the right of the center. Alan Smith is the goal scorer, and he's to the left. So who's all the way to the left congratulating Alan Smith? Can you tell? This picture was taken January 1st, 1990, if that helps. New Year's Day.
Wow. 1990. I'm just trying to think who was in that.
We've asked Alan who he thinks it, because it's kind of hard to tell because you can't see a number, and it doesn't appear to be Dixon. It doesn't appear to be Steve Bold, which was one of my thoughts. So we're leaning towards thinking it was O'Leary. Does it look like Dave, to you? Perhaps, maybe not as tall,
Could
but
be, but he's bigger. Dave O'Leary's bigger.
I don't know. I mean, that's kind of what we've come up with. And then the guy all the way to the right, just over the shoulder of the
That looks like
that one. I'm pretty sure who it is.
that Rodders.
No, I think that one. Oh, one of these
Baldy.
other ones.
Is that Baldy?
I think it's Merson. I think you could see a 10 on the back. And the only game I remember Boldy wearing number 10 for was actually Anfield. But I think it's Merson to the right, then Groves, then that's certainly Alan Smith with his leg half up in the air, having just scored the goal, and we think it's David O'Leary. I guess it could be somebody else, but that I'm kind of thinking this one.
Hey,
because,
Magic. By the way. Are you sure Anders Limpar weren't at Arsenal in 1990? He was.
I think for the season that began in 1990, I think he was. He wasn't in the season that ended in 1990. This is the 89-90 season. Didn't he arrive in the season where we went almost invincible?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So he would have
a few months. Yeah.
Right. He would have arrived about like 8 months after 7-8 months after
right.
this. I think this was the first season that you made your way into the first team.
Yeah.
The season you scored your first goal, which of course I was at against Nottingham Forest. But yeah, so this is January 1st, 1990 against Crystal Palace. Ian Wright was in this game playing for Crystal Palace, interestingly enough. The goals were Alan Smith scored 2, Lee Dixon scored 1. And Rodders got a redirected shot from Mickey Thomas to score the 4th goal, all between minutes 22 and 45 in the first half. It was an amazing game. Great way to start off the new year.
We could do with some of that now, Magic.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've had good games on New Year's Day against Palace. I think the scorpion kick from Giroud came that day. So it's not New Year's Day against Palace next week, but yeah, this was the final of that day, and I don't know, for the perfect painting above that couch, I kind of like this one because it just
there's a lot going on in it as well.
There's a lot going on in it. 2 of those 4 players have become what I like to call friends or friendly of mine, and it just to have them in their moment of success, just even though the season didn't turn out that great in the end. Is special. So, this is kind of more picturesque, but this just means more to me. So what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. Get the second one done.
And this is what I look like after the game. So maybe we'll just get a huge self-portrait of that in the flat as well. And then that'll drive everybody away. So I do need to just say Ruth Beck is, again, an amazing, amazing artist. Her information is at the bottom. You can go to buyruthbeckart.com to visit her page. And if you enter Highbury Squad, again, I'm giving away money here. If you enter Highbury Squad in the coupon section, you get 20%, not 15, not 16, not 18.5, but 20% off of any order. And of course, if you are keeping plugged into Gooners v Cancer, if you're at one of our in-person events, there's always Ruth Beck art being given away to incentivize donations, and also during our raffles. So, and she supports a lot of really amazing charities as well. Just an absolute wonderful credit to our fan base and to one of the many talented artists that you and Sophie like to highlight in our fan base. Speaking of amazing people, and speaking of Sophie, as you know, she's not here, and most of you now know from her candidness and the reason why she's not here, why she hasn't been here as often. And Sophie, I just wanted to say we miss you, we love you, we're here for you. God bless the Nicolau family, and of course, rest in peace eternally, Flora Nicolau. Knowing that your family are strong, that they're together, and I obviously never met Sophie's mom, but I feel like I know her from everything that Sophie's told me about her. I'm sure you're in the same boat. She seems like Sophie always says, like an absolutely epic human being.
A wonderful woman, yeah.
The apple obviously doesn't fall far from the tree, but I mean, a long life, never long enough. a wonderful life, a wonderful wife, mother, matriarch to a family, a beacon of strength, and just an example that, I mean, she sounds, and I don't mean this to sound the wrong way, but we all know that, I mean, women in their 90s grew up in an era where perhaps they didn't have the opportunity or the desire or the ability that, the knowledge that it was possible to make a huge impact on the world around them, rather than just their family. And from everything I understand about Flora, she was this person way ahead of her time, and it's inspired Sophie and the rest of her family to greatness, and more importantly, warmth and work ethic that brings success and love to everybody around them. So, my mom has always said something to me when I was far away and when I needed her, when she felt like she needed me, and she would always say, "My arms are around you," despite the distance. And Sophie, our arms are definitely all around you right now, and wishing the best for your incredible family, and love to you. And we'll see you back here on a regular basis very, very soon.
Yeah. Well said, Magic. Well said.
Yeah. And of course, she'll be home soon, and there'll be a reuniting with her loved ones and dogs and everybody. And I can't wait to hear that and the positivity that it brings. Now, speaking of coming back to the States, in one of the worst kept secrets around, Arsenal, again, coming back to the States again this summer, starting to look like an annual visit, which I had heard is pretty much the way Mikel Arteta wants it to be. Apologies to Australia, to the Far East, to, Oceania and all the other areas that we used to kind of rotate to, but it doesn't look like he loves traveling that far away. So what do we need to do? Who do I need to bribe to get you out to the States one of these days and do live content with us and hang out in our neck of the woods? I mean, are we getting closer to that becoming a possibility? Okay. I know I won't push you.
Very close. I can't say too much more, but very close.
We've talked about it before. I'm not going to push it, but yeah, I really, really look forward to that. And speaking of our Arsenal gathering in the States, the next big one is the 10th annual Gooner Gras in New Orleans. It's amazing that there's been 10 of these already. Looking forward to reuniting with some like 400 to 500 of my closest Arsenal friends and family, including these guys who are making the trip over from I believe it's Stoke-on-Trent area. That would be Kevin and Allison Demsek. Well, Kevin and Allison Dempsey, but AKA Demsek. I know he's in the chat. This was just a few weeks ago after the West Ham game at the Tollington, where I got to see both of them. Kevin has turned Allison into a supporter. She comes to games. She loves them now. Suddenly, after we took this picture, we realized that we had just lost to West Ham, and so we had to look a little sad. So this is us, in the reality, but just love reuniting with people. And I say it all the time. As an Arsenal fan, if you consume Arsenal solely as kind of a game day, win, lose, or draw, transfer window, win or die type of passion, look, I understand it. That's how most of us are about sports. But don't miss out on what the Arsenal kind of fan base has to offer in companionship. And I mean, look, you may have a perfectly good social life yourself without it. Good for you. But I mean, there's just a different feel in this fan base, and nothing makes me happier. And it can be especially helpful when the team is not performing at their best, than to be into the company of some of these amazing people that we share the passion with. And so many of these people are people that and have met over the years as well. And, doing good things, having good times, enjoying a drink, enjoying a meal, fundraising, and just loving our club together. So just a quick kind of photo montage of some of the people we ran into. There's Kenny. I know some people have opinions about Kenny, but whatever you think about his opinions, and he's a wonderful and lovely human being. There's the girl Fergus. Fergus on the concourse before the West Ham game. There's a group of amazing folks: Albert, Ken, Russ, Dan Potts, and Polly. Again on the concourse before the West Ham game. There's Perry at the Tollington before the West Ham game. He didn't need my help getting in the Tollington this time. The last time that we met at the Tollington, they wouldn't let him in until I said it was okay. He used to play for Arsenal.
Oh, yeah.
It's
well
done. Yeah.
Well done, Magic.
This is my son and I actually at Wolverhampton, where we got to watch Chelsea lose on our way back from Anfield. That's a random picture thrown in there. This is Tom after the Liverpool game in Liverpool. This is Fergus and Lyle, and I forget the guy's name on the right, but just these are some of the most hardcore home and away.
It's Ilsey there, isn't it?
Yeah, Trev Hills, just an absolute. I mean, you look at the definition of the word support, and these three guys appear on it. The guy to the right, not me. I'm just a goofball who, with a camera. Here's the Hoggy family with the lovely Jeno and Hoggy's daughter as well. And just a few more. Look who I ran into at Craven Cottage.
Hey.
Look who I bumped into, and I went up and introduced myself to him and said, maybe Sophie's mentioned me to him. He's like, oh yeah, I know who you are. And
Diamond.
Yes,
absolute diamond, Nick.
Love this guy. Hope to have him on the podcast at some point where I won't get the entire media and Arsenal fan base unreasonably yapping at me for having him on. But I mean, I'll never keep that guy from sharing his opinions. Marky, who we hung out with at the Fulham game, spent a little bit of time after the Fulham game, just an absolutely sweet guy. Randomly ran into, you know who that is? Alan Alger.
Alan's, is it Seeger?
Yeah, Alan Alger.
Alger. Sorry, Alger.
Ran into him randomly at the Cavern Club in Liverpool. This picture wasn't at the Cavern Club, but I went to the toilet, and when I got back, Jake was like, "This guy thinks he knows you," and he was like, "He's like, are you that guy Mike who's on Highbury Squad sometimes?" And so we texted Sophie, we sent her selfies, hung out together a little bit.
Love that.
This was before the Liverpool game with Trev, after the Liverpool game with my boy at the Cavern Club, and then the final one after with a debacle at Craven Cottage. We met up with one of the broadcasters of the game who came down to see us afterwards, who a guy
yes, I was working with Smudge yesterday, the Everton Aston Villa game.
Couldn't love this guy more. Just absolute gentleman. He helps tremendously with the charity. Whenever we're in the same place at the same time, he makes an effort to come see us and chat for a few minutes. So
congratulations to Alan. He's a granddad now.
Oh, that's amazing. Amazing. Well, he'll be the best one because I mean the guy just puts 110% into everything he does, and as do you. And it's just once you're part of this family and to any level of degree, it just cannot help but make you feel better when things are going rough. And that's the one thing I miss about podcasting as often as I used to is just really being able to connect with all these people. So I just wanted to share my recent enjoyment. As bad as the football playing on the pitch has been as fun and nice as the time has been spent with all these important people. Ruth is in the house. Remember, we just kind of covered Ruth. I don't know if she was here when we were talking about it, but Ruth Beck Art adorns. I adore her, and she adorns our walls in the Highbury flat. And I think we're gonna go, Ruth, with that action shot, the one with the players in it for that. But I'll talk to you about that afterwards. Mark thinks that we probably knew each other as teenagers on the North Bank of Highbury. There's a lot of people I probably was within 20 to 30 feet of at some point that I know now that I wouldn't have realized I was about. So absolutely amazing. Couple more questions if you've got the time from folks, and then we'll kind of close it out. You have a few more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. Where are they? A couple more questions. From Barry, who's a guy who I've met on frequent occasions while I've been over. Would you think of moving Saka into the 1-8 position, one of the 8 positions? I thought he meant one of the 8 other positions that he's shown that he can play, which is another thing. During a game, if we're struggling, or even to start a game. Have we seen this once or twice? And would you consider that more to get perhaps more people into the lineup without having to sub him out?
Magic, I'll be honest. I think we need to be a bit more flexible and not so rigid. Although when Saka's out there, you see how many players he attracts. Our problem has been we haven't been ruthless enough. But I still think there's there's opportunities for Saka to wander, Martinelli to wander, not be out on the left, come inside, be in the middle, go out and join. We've seen it happen a couple of times where Martinelli ends up on the right-hand side with Saka.
Yeah.
So I think having that flexibility could be really good for us.
To me, other than tracking back and making plays on defense, which Saka does quite a bit, I do feel like he tends to be more, not restricted, but tends to restrict his area to that side of the pitch more than really roaming more centrally or even to the opposite side of the pitch, unless the ball is all the way to the other end. And but he's usually the furthest right of most players on the pitch, except for when they do overlaps. So more so kind of static in that right-hand side than Martinelli is static on the left-hand side. You can move Saka into one of the eights, push Havertz up front, and push Jesus out right, even without necessarily subbing out any of what you would normally consider to be the typical starting lineup. I agree with you that I think some of that flexibility needs to be there, just so that we don't become as predictable as I think we were. I mean, I think that's the word that you can use the most against Fulham, is that we were just predictable.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
They knew what we were going to do.
And we didn't vary from that. And you don't have to be as good as us to match us or beat us if we're being as predictable as they want us to be. And that's I think what happened in that game. We just didn't have a whole lot of fresh ideas or a plan B. I hate these, but I love Yanto for asking this. What about the rumor of Nketiah plus 10K for Elise? 10K. I think you need 10 million. Yeah. 10K falls out of these guys' pockets like when they're on a Ferris wheel these days.
Elise is a really good player. He would enhance our squad without a shadow of a doubt.
I just love how everybody's trying to get like really, really good players by tossing in Nketiah and then like a token sum of money. Look, I think if we could do that, I think we'd be better off. I don't think that's that realistic.
It's not, because if he comes available, he's going to be a lot of money.
Yeah, and that kind of that values Nketiah at 30 to 40 million pounds on his own, which we could potentially get. I mean, look, we got 40 million for Iwobi and 45 million for Chamberlain. I mean, Nketiah has got way more experience playing at the top level than either of those two did at that point. But it's just a different marketplace, and he's a guy who has played so much that he's almost that you know what his ceiling is, instead of a guy who's got all this potential and you want to snag him young. So I do think his value is probably limited to 20, 25 million. But so I'm not sure that gets it done for Elise. Question from I'm going to give it a try. Ugo Chukwu, Sydney Mocha. How much can Arsenal spend in this window, and how much are they close to FFP? It's been a while since I've really been distracted with kind of other things. I haven't kept up my spreadsheets. I usually have pretty quick answers to these things, but we're about to get the financials from last season. They should be coming out on Company's House within the next couple weeks to a couple months at the absolute latest. That's when we'll find out what I think should be actually pretty close to turning a profit for last year. And then the 1920 and the 2021 combined COVID seasons for FFP come off the charts, and it just becomes about the 3 seasons post-COVID. The 21-22, when we finished 8th, 22-23, when we finished 21-22 when we finished 5th, 22-23 when we finished 2nd, and I worked myself into a bit of a corner there, but yeah, the last 3 seasons, not including the ones where we played in front of empty crowds, and that's when we'll really learn a lot more about this. I think the club are just being cautious. We haven't sold a lot of players for a lot of money recently, so unless we do that, I do think there's a pretty good reason to think that we are getting close to and really kind of going to want to be finding out, are we definitely getting Champions League money next year before we spend a lot of money? And in January, you don't know that yet. We're 4th right now. God forbid we finish out of the top 4, which would be a horrendous outcome for this season. We don't want to work ourselves into a position where we're penalized further for that, in a few more years, because we missed the number. So, I don't know that there's an exact answer to that, but there's definitely a be careful situation going on right now, and that's kind of where we are. So I think it's really kind of about where we'll wrap up here. Sophie, you got some massive love coming from your squaddies. We've got Ruth Beck reminding us, Highbury Squad, all uppercase, all one word for the coupon to work on buyruthbeckart.com. There's some amazing stuff in there. We got Mark reminding people that, if you're an ex-Arsenal player, you got to talk to me first before you just go strolling into the Tollington. That's how it works. If you were there that day, you know what I'm talking about. We've got Demsek saying, did Limpard join Everton from Arsenal in '94?
Yes.
That's the easiest user question we've ever gotten. The answer is yes.
Yeah.
And we've got somebody pointing out that I had hair 35 years ago. I hope I had hair 35 years ago. And just again, there's a lot of worrying, a lot of negativity, a lot of angst, a lot of pointing fingers at the Cronkies, about pointing fingers at Edu and Arteta. Let's see how it all ends out. We've got Stephen Feely repeating something I mentioned earlier in the podcast, which is that Gunnar Graw is January 25th to 28th. I will see Stephen there. As always, nice warm hug waiting for him. Can't wait to see Kevin and Allison and everybody else that comes to Gunnar Graw. And I believe this is the portion of the show where you say some profound and valuable things to the squaddies and finish us off.
Yeah, well, Mike, thank you so much for stepping in for the beautiful Sophie. We know
it is an honor and a privilege.
We know she's going through a very difficult time with her family. And thank you so much for coming on so we could produce us a show for the squaddies. Squaddies, got to say, for those who have joined us, thank you for joining us. Always remember, I always say it, tell your loved ones you love them. Make sure you do not ignore them. You look after them. And even if it's just one quick text to make sure they're okay, send it, because it does make a difference.
Absolutely.
And all I could say after that, squaddies, is at ease, squaddies. At ease, and thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon. At ease.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.